Welcome to the Carrie Barrett Show. You may have seen me pop up on here just a couple of minutes ago. We had some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that, but we are getting the show started on this Thursday morning, a little bit later than usual. First of all, thank you for being here. If you are not sure of who I am, my name is Carrie Barrett. I am the owner-founder of Carrie Barrett Incorporated. I help small business owners and entrepreneurs with media training and publicity coaching. So, getting them media, understanding how to craft pitches and leverage their media opportunities and appearances for impact, visibility, credibility, and of course, clients and more media. And then I also help those in a corporate environment, lawyers and executives often with media training and then getting ready for virtual and sometimes in-person presentations or speaking opportunities on a live stage. So today we're talking about how to fully leverage video or your webcam, if you will, during calls. Not necessarily talking about social media, although some of these practices do apply, but we're sort of getting into the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so if you have questions, in fact, I'll drop a quick reminder here in the chat. Drop your questions and comments in the chat. And then I actually have an additional question for you at the end of this particular segment. And if you are a business owner or an entrepreneur, this question is particularly helpful for me if you answer it. So I would love for you to stick around and answer it. I promise I'll get you out of here on time. I know I started late. That's my fault. So we'll make this particular live stream effective and efficient and we'll keep it moving. Right. So what inspired this particular episode is that I was, well, for a number of reasons, but specifically, I was speaking with a neighbor and a friend of mine who is a lawyer at a firm here in New Jersey. And this person was saying they're really struggling with some of their associates showing up to virtual depositions or even virtual court, which is still happening, not as frequently, certainly, as it was when we were back in the middle of the lockdown. But as we all knew at that point, there were some processes and habits that we picked up during the pandemic that were going to extend because of the efficiencies of being able to do things virtually. And this person was saying, this lawyer was saying, one of the things that we are struggling with is sometimes our associates will show up to court in a hoodie. There's just that sense that being on camera is perhaps requires less professional behavior, or the same standards don't apply. Additionally, in talking with a not law firm, but a larger multinational corporation, we realized that the chief sales officer was struggling to host virtual town halls. And this is a global workforce, and the town halls were sometimes company-wide, sometimes they were for specific departments. But this particular person who needed to have impact and credibility, especially with such a diversified workforce, was struggling to show up on camera. In fact, every time this person did, they, and I'm intentionally using neutral pronouns here, would shake like a leaf whenever the camera was turned on. So I want to talk about, excuse me, I want to talk about sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly, why showing up on camera is important, where it can go wrong, and where it goes right. So the advantages, and I think most of us are probably fairly familiar with what they are, but if you do have a question, please go ahead and drop it in the comments, and I'll make sure that we have a chance to answer it either here live, or if you're listening to the replay or on a podcast, you'll get the answer there as well. So The ways that showing up on video can help when you're doing, let's say, certainly if you're in virtual court or doing a virtual deposition, or if you're doing a virtual client pitch, or if you are, again, I said this applies to a broad spectrum of situations. You're hosting a webinar, or you're doing a discovery call and you're doing it with video versus a regular phone call or in person. Cameras do help create that human presence, if you will, and connection. It's not ideal. Part of the reason that it's not ideal for that is that people on the other side of the camera don't really fully understand how to use it well either. But it does also help with understanding nonverbal communication, facial expressions, body language, things that you're not going to be able to get over a phone call. And because most of us are recording our camera sessions, we do have the opportunity to go back and watch and pick up on lost nonverbals that we may have missed during the actual call itself. Engagement and focus. They do actually encourage attendees to stay engaged, to stay attentive, because while there is distraction everywhere, it is more pronounced when we are in a remote workforce. And there are things you can do to make sure that your employees or your team are staying engaged. And professionalism. It does help you maintain a greater sense of professionalism. And I will be the first to tell you that I don't necessarily ascribe to everything needs to be super buttoned up and professional communication is always the best communication. And what I mean by that is we have a tendency to sort of shrink a little bit when we're on a camera because it's still a little bit confusing. We don't know where to look and what to do and how to pick up on all the sort of nonverbals that we may get sitting in a team meeting that's live and in person. But what I do mean by professional demeanor is that you're not necessarily, on your phone or doing something that you wouldn't do when you're in person. All right. So some of the common mistakes and some of the pitfalls are, yes, technical issues. And we could do a whole series on technical issues, but specifically poor lighting, bad angles, to some degree, low quality cameras. But for example, if you have a smartphone that was made in the last, let's say, 5 years, you've got a camera that can deliver 4K video. So it's not a low quality camera that's creating the problem. I'm actually right now on a MacBook Pro, so a laptop, not a desktop. And this is a 2019 computer. So it's not brand new, and the quality of the camera is not bad. And I have touch up my appearance checked on the little box. So it's perhaps a little more filtered than the camera would be on its own. My point being that to a lesser degree, a low quality camera is a problem. I would say that poor lighting and bad angles are bigger issues for most people. I was watching, I should say, a podcast produced by employees at a large multinational firm. And there were, I believe in this particular episode, 5 people that were on the screen, not all at the same time individually, but part of the conversation. And some of them, even at that level, had camera angles that were something like this, which in and of itself is distracting and also just signals that you don't fully know exactly what it is that you're doing. And right or wrong, people will assume that if you're not exactly sure what you're doing on camera, there may be a chance that you don't know exactly what it is that you're doing in your business. That applies to a lesser degree to very large organizations that already have established their credibility and their viability. It is urgent, I would say, if you are in a smaller business or if you are a founder. Right or wrong, people make those assumptions and they don't necessarily even understand that on a conscious level, there's just something that's ticking in the background that says to them, something is kind of off with this. And it may not even say it that eloquently. It may just be a feeling that they get and they don't even fully recognize it. Inappropriate backgrounds, I'm not going to dive too much into that because I think most of us understand at this point an inappropriate background is an inappropriate background. I used to absolutely loathe the blurred backgrounds when we first started into this remote communication environment. And I have softened my critique of those. What I do still loathe is a bad virtual background, something that has your business logo on it or that is not pristine, meaning you're wearing headphones and I can see the actual background in between your head and what is going over your head. That's not as important in non-high stakes environments, but if you are speaking on a client pitch, or if you are on a podcast or a live stream or a town hall that is being watched by thousands of people, that's a high stakes environment, and that's where you want to avoid those sorts of things. Distractions and etiquette, noisy environments, interruptions. Again, we've all grown a little bit more generous in what we have the ability to tolerate and our expectations. For example, if you have kids, you may know that today is take your child to work day. Well, I work at home. So there's a pretty good chance at some point during this live stream that one of my children is going to bust into this office. We've grown, again, a little bit more generous and a little bit more tolerant of those sorts of environments. Overuse or fatigue. Now, when we first started in the pandemic, I would have been the first to say everything needs to be done on camera. It's the only way to make full use of what we have in these sort of like pods that we're finding ourselves in. That is, again, not as urgent now as it used to be 4 years ago. If you need to use a camera or you are using a camera for every single interaction, there is a point of diminishing returns. This does not apply, again, to those high stakes environments. So those are really sort of the 4 common mistakes and pitfalls that people make when they're using a camera for client calls, for communicating to internal or external stakeholders. When you are in an environment that is a revenue generating environment, that's what I'm going to determine to be high stakes. I'm not talking necessarily about a team meeting or a virtual happy hour. Team meetings, understanding how to communicate effectively is certainly still important. There's billions of dollars that are lost annually just for US-based businesses that have ineffective communications protocols or employees who don't fully understand how to communicate effectively. And that applies, tenfold to employees that are communicating on camera. So I don't want to say that those aren't important. They are. But when I say high stakes, I'm talking more about revenue generating opportunities, i.e. podcasts, live streams, client pitches. Certainly if you are in the legal space and you're doing you're in virtual court or you're taking a virtual deposition, understanding how you need to show up and how you need to appear and that it's not a casual environment is of utmost importance. So there's a ton of things that we could dive into in terms of what goes wrong, but I want to take the remainder of this episode to talk about some of the technical stuff. I often talk about delivery. I talk about how to communicate effectively on camera. I talk about how to show up. Sometimes I talk about what to wear, but I want to talk about some of that technical stuff because what I find when I talk to people about their challenges in getting on camera, oftentimes it initially starts with, I don't understand the tech. When we get to the deeper issue, it's, I'm afraid of showing up, or I look stupid, or I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to communicate effectively. That's the deeper level issue, but the superficial issue is technical and sometimes time. And so it's still important for you to understand how you show up effectively on camera. So I'm going to just do a very quick primer on how to frame yourself and show up so that you have good lighting, good angles, and you have a good quality shot. Then I'm going to ask you my question about publicity, and then I'm going to wrap things up to be mindful of your time. All right. So there's a few spaces where horizontal video, right, landscape, is still used versus vertical. Okay. And vertical is what you might see on TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. Horizontal is what you might see in an environment like this, or certainly on YouTube, or if you are part of a webinar, you will see your video shot in a horizontal or landscape version. When you are shooting, and I'm going to talk about that specifically because we're talking about high stakes environments, which I'm not really including social media in that because it's not live and you can edit. So let's talk about how to frame yourself for virtual court, virtual depositions, high stakes client calls, webinars, or meetings with internal or external stakeholders. All right, I'm going to move my camera shot up. And in fact, my lighting is not great today. I'm in a bit of a revamp of my office space. And so what I have going on behind me is not normally what I have going on behind me. And it is affecting my light to some degree as well. And here comes. Come on, Ben, come and say hi. Take your child to work day. He's on his hover shoes. Come say hello. Benjamin. Come here. Yeah, come over here. Can you say hello?
Hi.
What are you home for?
Bring your child to work today.
What is in your mouth?
A baguette.
A baguette. What are you learning from working with me today? Nothing.
I don't know.
Nothing so far?
Yeah, nothing.
Okay, very good. Can you give me a second here and go back into the other room for a moment? How old are you, Ben?
7.
Can you say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye.
Do you
See you guys later.
Do you interrupt me often when I'm here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. See ya. Thanks for sticking around through that. So when we talk about how to frame yourself and your lighting, and generally speaking, get out of here, you lunatic. You want to have yourself usually in the middle of your shot. So you can see here that there's a little bit of dead space on either side of me. And what I mean by dead space is it's not space that's filled with me. It's filled with my background, etc. You will find that this can be adjusted fairly easily if you're on a laptop, simply by moving your monitor forward or back. Benjamin. Oh my God. Or by adjusting where you sit in front of the camera. Okay.
Bye.
See you later, bud. You want to have just a little bit of headroom between the top of your head and the bottom of wherever your shot is within this little rectangle. If you take a look, and I don't know if you watch news, I use a lot of news analogies because news is my background. That's the expertise and the experience I bring with me to working with my clients. But if you watch, let's say I say a single anchor, so a solo show, and you'll often see those as like World News Tonight or NBC Nightly News or the CBS Evening News. There's a single anchor. And the reason I'm using that is because you are, in this case, also a single anchor. You are the show or the subject matter expert or whatever it is. When you think about how they're framed, think about how close they are to the camera. They're framed kind of similar to this. There's not as much room, generally speaking, on either side. They have the ability to finesse and fine tune their shot a little bit more than we do at home. But the reason that they're framed that way, at least in the beginning of the show, when they're welcoming the audience to the program, is not haphazard. It's very intentional, and it's designed so that they can establish eye contact. And I put that in air quotes because clearly it's not direct eye contact, but they can recreate the feeling of eye contact with the audience by being close. And the audience can look in their eyes and sort of replicate the way that they might communicate in person. And it's a great way to establish rapport. Okay. Now you're thinking of this from your audience's perspective, not yours. I know when you're looking in the camera, you can't see the audience, but the goal of effective communication is to always be thinking about things from the audience's perspective, not yours. Okay. So you're fairly close. You're in the middle of the frame, and there is a little bit of headroom between top and bottom. What you don't want is a shot that looks like this. And I see this all the time. Oh, you can see where I stopped painting my ceiling, right? Or a shot where you are at the bottom of your screen in some way, shape, or form. This applies to social media as well, right? The next thing that you want to be thinking about is your lighting. And I mentioned that my lighting is not ideal right now, but you need to have some sort of soft, full light in front of you, meaning you either need to be facing windows, or you need to have artificial light in front of you, or a combination of the two. Aside from being able to see into your eyes because of the way you're framed, the second element of being able to actually do that is being able to see your eyes. And if you are dark, or you are silhouette, or you are, you have very uneven light on one side of your face or the other, barring some sort of cinematic or theatrical vibe that you're going for, you need to have soft, full light in front of your face so that your audience can see your eyes and they can see your facial expressions. Those are two things. And I know it sounds like it's simply aesthetics, but I promise you that is aesthetics with a purpose. And finally, having a camera. If you do not have a camera on your computer, or you have an older computer and the camera's not great, you can buy a relatively inexpensive webcam that you can attach to your computer with an adapter, depending on what version you have, and simply fit over the back of your monitor. Logitech is a great one. You can find, in fact, a whole series of cameras that I recommend on my Gear Starter Kit, which you can find in the links in the features section of my LinkedIn profile. If you have a smartphone, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, that was made, let's say, in the last 5 years or so, you do actually have the capability of shooting the exact same sort of video that you would see on your TV screen when you're watching the news, or you're watching a cinematic studio production movie. In fact, you probably have capabilities that are beyond that. You probably have 8K or more, but we don't use that because it's impossible to upload. You have 4K video, and that's all you need to have studio quality video. Where it goes wrong is that you're framed incorrectly, or you have a guest visitor who's not a professional, or you have bad lighting. No, don't do that, Betty. So it's not that the camera itself can't shoot great video. It's that the way that you're using it is not optimized. And really, the only things you need to have it optimized are light. You need to understand how to frame yourself, and you need to understand where or how to position your camera. Have a stable surface for a call like this. If you're creating social media and you're doing a walk and talk, as we used to call them in the newsroom, stability is not quite as much of an issue. But for a call like this, you need to have a flat, stable surface. So I hope that this was helpful. Now, here's the question that I want to ask before we wrap this up for entrepreneurs and business owners. As you know, I do a lot of media training. I do virtual presentation coaching and on-stage coaching for executives and lawyers and business owners who are looking to, leverage speaking engagements and talking to an audience for impact, visibility, credibility, and sales. There is a component of this, I think, specifically as it applies to small business owners and entrepreneurs, that I have not previously offered. And that is what you do with the media training, specifically in terms of attracting and landing media opportunities, local TV, national TV, newspapers, magazines, digital opportunities, Entrepreneur and Forbes to some degree, but I'm not talking as much about pay to play, and very often they're pay to play. I'm talking about landing earned media opportunities, free media opportunities with a great audience. So what I would like to do is create a program that focuses on publicity or PR coaching. So, what is PR? How to craft a pitch? How to find pitch ideas, how to send a pitch, how to put together a demo reel for on-camera media opportunities, television, broadcast news, or cable news.
Take this and go outside with this.
Okay, how to leverage the experience in the moment and then after, how to create the connections and create the relationships in the media, media training, creating a playbook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would love to know, and please either drop this in the chat or shoot me a DM if you don't want to make it public. Would you, as a small business owner or entrepreneur, find that type of program helpful? And if you would, what specifically would you be looking to do with it? Is it generate more clients? Is it create visibility, create buzz, credibility? Maybe it's a combination of those things. What are the desires that you hope to achieve if you were to do something like this, or the goals that you hope to achieve, the desires you have, and what would you need to have in it to make that a win? I realize it's a lot of questions. I'd be happy to set up some time to talk if it's easier for me to just ask you them and then walk through. And I'll put some links to do that. But if you would find that helpful, please let me know, and let me know specifically what it is that would draw you to a program like that and what you would need to have in it in order to make it a win. Now, if you have questions about just working with me in general, I'll drop a link to my booking link and schedule something there. And you can also, if you're not quite ready to go down that route, but just would love some free resources to get yourself started, you can go to the feature section on my LinkedIn profile, or you can go to my website. Again, I'll put the link in the comments, or if you're listening to the podcast, this will all be in the show notes. carriebarrett.com/resources, and you can find a bunch of free resources in order to get yourself ready to go. Okay, I hope that this has been helpful for you. Coming up next week, we are going to have a fun episode. It's not necessarily about camera stuff, but we're going to be sharing the strangest interviews that we have ever been on. And I have stories, trust me, and this is like maybe sort of like pre-employee protections, but holy cow, I've got some doozies that I'm going to share from my time in the news business. And I'd love for you to share yours as well. So that will be next week, same time, same place on the Carrie Barrett Show Live. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.